Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Michael Edison Hayden, a Senior Investigative Reporter at the Southern Poverty Law Center and a three-time grantee of the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. And his work has been featured in the New York Times, Slate, Foreign Policy, ABC News, and the Wall Street Journal, among other publications. And he has an article at the Southern Poverty Law Center 1 year after January the 6th, The Hard Right Digs In. Welcome to Background Briefing, Michael Edison Hayden.
Thanks. Happy to be here, Ian.
Well, thanks for joining us. And I think it's more than the hard right that's digging in. I mean, former President Trump seems to basically control the Republican Party, and his most ardent supporters like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, and Lauren Bobbitt, and others, they're actually conducting a purge of the Republican ranks now, that anybody who's not 100% aboard the Trump train is going to be primaried. So it seems to me that it's not just the foot soldiers that are riled up. They're being directed from, and there seems to be some real strategy behind it.
Yeah. I think better to define what I mean by the hard right here, because I would include those individuals as part of that tent. A lot of attention was paid to people like the demonstrators in Charlottesville, who in August of 2017 came to that town, attempted to remove a Confederate statue. There's a white nationalists, what Southern Poverty Law Center would call specifically white nationalists. In some cases, they were neo-Nazis. We make very specific academic distinctions about that. What I mean by the hard right generally are people who ascribe to anti-democratic, anti-democracy views, and who attach the conservative movement to a kind of authoritarianism that you would see from Polish political parties, from what you see in Hungary, things like that. And it's been a transformation over years, by the type of people who fund the Republican Party, I think, to turn them in this direction.
Well, there's a very interesting article by the Yale philosopher Jason Stanley at The Guardian, and he's written books, How Propaganda Works and How Fascism Works, and the article titled is Donald Trump Has Normalized Fascism, and obviously that's a word that's thrown around a lot, but this is a very serious scholar who really knows what he's talking about. And just a quote from the article: "The contemporary American fascist movement is led by oligarchical interests for whom the public good is an impediment, such as those in the hydrocarbon business, as well as a social, political, and religious movement with roots in the Confederacy. As in all fascist movements, these forces have found a popular leader unconstrained by the rules of democracy, this time in the figure of Donald Trump." So if you have a situation here in this country where, by various polls, something like 70 or 80% of Republicans believe that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president and that Trump really won the election, that's an alarming statistic in itself. And then from the University of Chicago, there's a recent report that said within that group of Republicans who believe the Stop the Steal lie, there is about 22 million Americans who believe in violence, that violence will be necessary to restore Donald Trump to his rightful place in the White House. And you've got into that mix then 450 million guns in this country. I see that as a very lethal mixture. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely. I know Jason's work. I interviewed him, for a Q&A about propaganda coming out of the right-wing machine in 2020, and since that time, not a lot has really changed for the better. What I would say is, of course, people, the first thing that comes to mind are these black and white images that you would see when it comes to fascism. And I think that they tend to recoil when they think that in the context of the United States. and say like, oh no, I mean, come on, here I am. I'm speaking freely on social media. I may even be posting leftist or liberal things or whatever. I'm free to do so many things. One of the reasons I prefer the term hard right is to understand the basic premise here. You don't have to go into scholarly definitions of fascism to fully understand that they want to take power by any means possible. And I think that is an important detail. We saw what happened on January 6th. The fact that so many people come inured to this. We had, try to imagine like 20, 30 years ago in this country, if you tell them, yeah, a whole bunch of supporters of one particular political party would, smash out the windows of the Capitol building. And yet you have so many people trying to downplay that. I mean, it's a very, very scary thing how normalized it's become. They want to take power by any means necessary. They are trying to undo aspects of our democratic process slowly at the margins in order to secure those things. It used to be just gerrymandering was one of the loopholes that could be exploited. But now there's so many things they're trying to use to try to limit people from voting and to kind of suppress the vote, particularly of Black, brown, and indigenous people. And, I think that is a much clearer thing because, when you say fascism, people conjures images of Hitler and things like that. You can say, oh, we're not close to there yet. And we're not. But you can certainly imagine soon also a world in which that the majority of the population does not trust our democracy. And that's very scary. And that's going to come when, this party does things in order to keep people from voting to such a degree that they can maintain power and keep people like Trump in power.
And again, I'm speaking with Michael Edison Hayden, the Senior Investigative Reporter at the Southern Poverty Law Center and a 3-time grantee of the Pulitzer Center on crisis reporting. And his work has also been featured in the New York Times, Slate, Foreign Policy, ABC News, and the Wall Street Journal, among other publications. And he has an article at the Southern Poverty Law Center, 1 year after January the 6th, the hard right digs in. So, obviously, again, as I mentioned, analogies with Hitler, they're being thrown around a lot quite loosely, but nevertheless, there are some fairly real analogies here between what happened in Germany in the 30s and what's happening to this country now, and we'll call it the hard right. I mean, the mechanism is the same, where you have to demonize an internal enemy. And in Hitler's case, it was the Jews and all of the infirm people. And we just had this tattooed white supremacist up in Colorado shoot 5 people because he thought they were weak, Untermenschen. So there's an example of that kind of mentality. But Trump came out literally when he announced he's running for the president, creating an internal enemy, the Mexicans, along with the Muslims. So there are some fairly similar mechanisms at play here, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just missed a big one, which is, that all of the classic fascist, moments of the 20th century, I mean, of course, Jewish people are a huge focus, but also leftists are a very big galvanizing force for these people.
Sure. Well, they were the first people that the Nazis went after. The concentration camps were filled up initially with leftists before they then started to exterminate the Jews.
Correct. And often that's a way into, we often see with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that's like, oh, well, this is all coming from degeneracy, and that's coming from Jewish people, et cetera, et cetera. These really horrific conspiracy theories that help to, fascists to form their worldview, understand this kind of friend-enemy distinction that their leaders want them to see the world through. But the demonization of the opposition, and when I use the left, I mean, how strong is the American left really in any case? I think, really useful to understand that, or to see as an example of what is happening, the kind of craze around Antifa that happened during the Trump era. You may recall, I mean, you probably don't recall this, but, during Trump's inauguration, in 2017, there was obviously Antifa drew a lot of headlines and so forth, protesting Trump's event. Richard Spencer, someone punched Richard Spencer in the face. And what came after that, within a year, there was this really crazy thing where it was like this Antifa civil war. This was a fake news event, basically, where there was just tons and tons of traffic on right-wing blogs hyping up this idea that there would be an Antifa civil war on November 4th, 2017. And, I remember because I was reporting at that time, I think it was for Newsweek, and all the stories I would do about this conspiracy theory were just doing just tremendous traffic, like just tons of traffic. I would see the results. I said, who the hell are these people? Who is clicking on these stories to such a degree? And, then I realized just that the appetite, the appetite to see Antifa, the specter of Antifa as some sort of enemy, that these people dressed like ninjas were going to come into people's homes and try to take their guns and try to do all these horrible things to them that justify why people have bought so many guns in this country to begin with. That was a very effective thing for the Trump administration to make people scared. Black Lives Matter became another one where, it went from, this is the civil rights message that is very popular, and then they would weaken it over time by saying this is a communist thing, this is communist infiltration of our country, et cetera, et cetera. Critical race theory is like another one of these things. So they keep coming up with these kind of boogeymen to reinforce this friend-enemy distinction that everybody feels right now. I think the white nationalist website VDARE refers to it as a cold civil war, which is, kind of grim that they are so accurately describing it, considering what the role they played in creating it in the first place. But it's that part of it is happening. This desire to turn people who align with conservative values into people who cannot trust their neighbors, who believe that they're perpetually in a state of war against people who live in cities, people who have slightly different values, et cetera. That is really scary, and that makes us very, very vulnerable to a potential, collapse or the rise of the hard right in the future.
Well, it seems that, Trump's always had it covered one way or the other. Had he lost to Hillary Clinton, he would have been running around the country leading rallies of lock her up, and stop the steal. And he said next time around in 2024, he'll do it one way or the other. Either he'll get the presidency back or he'll lead another insurgency against whoever the incumbent is. And that would apply even if it's not Trump himself, because his acolytes, like the governor of Florida, will do the same. So what's happened to the Republicans? Why have they abandoned democracy? Obviously they're intimidated. And as I mentioned earlier, you've got Bobbitt and Marjorie Taylor Greene and these other Republican radicals, Trumpsters, starting to purge the ranks. So you can understand why they're terrified. But on the other hand, you can't accept the fact that, one of the most telling things to me, Michael, is the conversation that took place recently between Vice President Harris and Angela Merkel of Germany, stepping down as a long-serving chancellor there. And very plaintively, Merkel asked the Vice President, and what's happening to America? The Europeans were liberated by American soldiers in World War II, the West Europeans were, and the Americans were the heroes. They got rid of the Nazis. And now you've got Nazis in the United States government itself. Yeah.
Well, if you look at our history, throughout, it's not like, we narrowly escaped other potential authoritarian moments throughout our history. That being said, I think that this is we are right to isolate and elevate this as a very unique danger zone. So what's happening exactly? If you can think back to 2014, the Republican Party was they were reckoning with Obama's dominance as a political figure, and they were putting forward with their rebuttals and to speeches and things like that, what really looks like a very diverse collection of Republicans compared to what you can imagine now. There's like Bobby Jindal. I mean, regardless of what you believe, what your opinions about their politics, but Bobby Jindal, Nikki Haley, to a degree, Marco Rubio's, his Cuban roots, and I guess Ted Cruz, who is so now so aligned with Trumpism. They were really trying to figure something like this out, and an answer to the changing demographics in the country, and ultimately they really wanted to elevate either Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush, and they had Jeb Bush was speaking in Spanish on the campaign trail, which of course Trump supporters later mocked and turned into this really kind of bullying, fodder for bullying. And then Trump came along, and he didn't, he saw, I think, the propaganda on Fox and all that stuff, the potential in it to really awaken a kind of rage in the population that these other politicians were not really doing. This idea that they would work along with changing demographics to continue to make to continue to do things as they had always been done between the two parties. He came along. He was not beholden to the Republican elites at that time. He could do whatever he wanted to some degree. And, only a few people like Ann Coulter, who's, of course, contributed to white nationalist websites, really supported him at the beginning. And I think Coulter described it as like, Trump found a $1,000 bill or something on the ground or whatever, that he just came along and picked it up. And by shouting, build a wall, and seeing the results, Trump is a carnival barker, an entertainer, and he was able to just by testing these things out on the campaign trail, see how popular they would be. So the answer is years of propaganda coming from like Fox News, and that had really whet the appetite of the Republican Party for this kind of authoritarian, rage-fueled, vengeance-based politics. And then Trump came along and exploited it, being the grifter that he is, seeing the potential to use that and ride it into power, which he did. He used that. He exploited social media, which is again a profit thing, profits off of people's feelings of anxiety and anger. They fuel those things. And that combination, I think, has kind of, created a perfect storm where now nothing short of hard right authoritarianism will do for this party. I mean, the idea that somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene can't become president one day, you need to wake up to that possibility of her becoming president. Because,
God help us.
yeah, but I mean, but people said that about Trump, and I think you need to realize this is not. We're not dealing. We are not dealing with people who want to work with other people. They want dominance. They are ingesting memes that glorify violence and so forth. Just like in Charlottesville, they were sharing memes about people running people over with a car, and sure enough, a neo-Nazi, James Fields, goes and does it. I mean, the January 6th, talking about storming the Capitol, everybody saw the memes. Nobody really believed it except for a few people in my field who focus very exclusively on this subject. We need to realize that all this propaganda that they're saying people are ingesting on Fox, they are not looking at it with a wink and a nod. They are taking it quite seriously, and I think that's how we are in the place that we are. If you're looking for some good news, and not to just focus on the bad, is that what happens when they get it? What happens when they undo democracy altogether and they really do install those type of people? I mean, I do think that they are going to. This movement will run into a lot of trouble governing, and we saw a huge preview of that in the summer of 2020, when, of course, the clashes between Trump and protesters became such a national story, as well as the Black Lives Matter demonstrations following the death of George Floyd. I wonder how easy would it actually be if they really needed to go all the way with authoritarian control in a country as diverse as the United States, and a country with so reliant on major cities like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, will be very difficult to control that sort of thing.
Right. Well, just in the last minute here, I'd like to quote from your article the Filipino journalist Maria Ressa, who won the Nobel Prize, a very courageous woman, under constant death threats from the thug Duterte, the president of the Philippines. During her acceptance for the Nobel Prize on December the 10th, she said, "We are at a sliding door moment where we can continue down the path we're on and descend further into fascism, or we can each choose to fight for a better world. To do that, you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth?" So I thank you for joining us here today, Michael Edison Hayden.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for the work you do.
Well, thank you. And again, I've been speaking with Michael Edison Hayden, a senior investigative reporter at the Southern Poverty Law Center and a 3-time grantee of the Pulitzer Center on crisis reporting, whose work has been featured in the New York Times, Slate, Foreign Policy, ABC News, and the Wall Street Journal, among other publications. And he has an article at the Southern Poverty Law Center 1 year after January the 6th, The Hard Right Digs In. This has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producer Graham Fitzgibbon. And to help us sustain this program into the future and assure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate or publictruthmedia.org, where you will find our non-profit Public Truth Media Foundation, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And if you missed any of today's program and would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we'll include extended interviews searchable by topic and have made it easy for you to sign up for daily email updates that provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we also encourage your ratings and reviews on these platforms. Find us on Twitter and Facebook at Ian Masters Media. And please do help us reach more listeners by sharing this program with friends, family, and colleagues. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another background briefing at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.